When we think about a story built on the premise of a billionaire CEO offering to double the pay of a struggling single dad if he can translate something, the first layer of intrigue comes from the clash of worlds that it suggests. On one side stands an individual who has everything: wealth, power, influence, and the ability to test people almost for sport. On the other side is a father who lives not for luxury but for survival and responsibility, whose primary motivation is to provide for his child. The theme becomes one of testing the underdog against impossible odds, while the conflict lies in whether intelligence, resilience, and necessity can outmatch the arrogance and expectations of power. The moment the CEO issues his challenge, the story reveals not just a transaction but an implicit commentary on the vast gap between the privileged and the struggling. For the billionaire, the challenge may be an afterthought, a kind of puzzle or dare, something to spice up a business meeting or a recruitment process. For the single dad, however, it is everything: an opportunity to alter the course of his life, a test of his worth not just as an employee but as a provider, and a trial of his endurance in the face of overwhelming odds. That is where the theme crystallizes: the disparity in stakes. What is trivial for one side becomes life-altering for the other. This imbalance creates the tension that keeps the story alive. The conflict is not only external, between the CEO and the father, but also internal. The father must confront his own doubts, his insecurities about whether he is capable of rising to such a challenge, and his fears of failure, not just for himself but for his child who depends on him. In contrast, the CEO's internal struggle is more subtle. He is used to people disappointing him, to promises falling short, and to seeing money bend others to his will. When he throws out the challenge, he may expect to prove once again that the gap between him and ordinary people is unbridgeable. But the possibility that this single dad could actually succeed creates a disruption to his worldview, threatening his assumptions about talent, perseverance, and the value of human resourcefulness. Translation as the specific test is not a random choice but a metaphorical one. Language is a bridge between worlds, between cultures, between those who have and those who have not. To translate is to understand deeply, to bridge not just words but meanings, to capture nuance, context, and emotion across boundaries. For the father, taking on the task of translation symbolizes his role in life already. He translates his struggles into opportunities, his hardships into lessons for his child, his exhaustion into resilience. The billionaire may believe that translation is just about linguistic skill, but in the story's thematic depth, it becomes about empathy, intelligence, and the ability to transform what seems insurmountable into something accessible. The high stakes of the challenge push the theme further. "I'll double your pay" is not just about money, though on the surface it is. To the father, doubled pay could mean paying off debts, securing stable housing, affording medical care, or giving his child opportunities that were previously unreachable. It represents security and dignity. For the CEO, doubling pay is a negligible amount, a gesture that costs him little but asserts his dominance, his ability to control the terms of reward. The asymmetry of sacrifice, what one stands to gain versus what the other risks, becomes the foundation of the story's drama. The conflict also highlights meritocracy versus privilege. The CEO's world is built on the belief that money is the ultimate incentive, that people will do anything for it, and that his offers dictate value. The father's participation, however, is not merely about money. It is about pride, proving himself, and finding a way to validate that he is not just scraping by but capable of achieving excellence under pressure. This duality makes the conflict richer. It is not only a battle for a financial reward but for respect, recognition, and self-belief. Another dimension of the theme is the power of underestimation. Billionaire CEOs often underestimate those beneath them, assuming that a janitor, a clerk, or a single dad struggling at the bottom of the hierarchy cannot possess extraordinary skill. The challenge is offered with an undercurrent of doubt, almost mockery, that makes the father's position more precarious. If he fails, it confirms the stereotype. If he succeeds, he overturns the assumptions of power, which is why the story carries not just personal stakes but symbolic ones. The father's success could serve as a metaphor for the possibility that brilliance exists in unexpected places, that the world is filled with undiscovered talent hidden under layers of responsibility and struggle. At the heart of this theme and conflict lies the question of fairness. Is the challenge itself fair? For the CEO, it might seem so: translate the text, prove your worth, get rewarded. But fairness depends on perspective. For someone with access to elite education, tutors, and resources, translation of a difficult text may be a matter of study and training. For the father, who may have had to teach himself languages while juggling 2 jobs, the fairness is more complicated. His challenge is not just to translate but to overcome the obstacles of fatigue, limited access to time, and the weight of real-life struggles that shadow his concentration. The fairness of the contest is tainted by the uneven playing field, which only adds to the tension and weight of his participation. The theme also touches on the intersection of intellect and necessity. For many in privileged positions, intellect is cultivated for prestige or curiosity. For the father, intellect is a survival tool. He learns, adapts, and sharpens his skills not for admiration but because necessity demands it. In this way, the conflict becomes not just a test of intelligence but of lived experience. The billionaire can hire translators, consult experts, or dismiss the task entirely. The father, however, cannot afford to fail. His entire life has been an exercise in translating adversity into possibility, so this test, while daunting, is also a reflection of everything he has been forced to do already. There is also a thematic layer of dignity versus humiliation. The billionaire's offer, while lucrative, carries with it a risk of embarrassment. If the father fails, he does not just lose the opportunity, he risks being seen as inadequate, perhaps mocked or dismissed. Accepting the challenge is therefore not just about courage but about willingness to face potential humiliation in pursuit of something greater. The CEO, by contrast, risks nothing of his dignity. If the father succeeds, he pays money, but he retains his position of power. This imbalance of dignity at stake intensifies the story's emotional charge. The conflict further sharpens when we consider the idea of spectatorship. Such challenges are rarely issued in private, they often come in front of others, whether employees, assistants, or other executives. The father, then, is not only tested against the document but against the gaze of an audience, the pressure of being watched and judged. This transforms the task into a performance, making every hesitation, every pause, every flicker of doubt magnified. The CEO may thrive in such environments, accustomed to attention, but for the father, this spotlight becomes yet another obstacle. The theme of pressure, of how individuals handle scrutiny, deepens the conflict. Underlying all of this is the central irony that the billionaire underestimates. True brilliance often thrives not in luxury but in struggle. Necessity sharpens skills, and adversity forges resilience. The single dad's entire life has prepared him for challenges where failure is not an option, where persistence is his only tool. The CEO may wield money as power, but the father wields determination born of love for his child. That love becomes the invisible force driving his effort, a motivator stronger than greed or prestige. In this sense, the theme is about the underestimated strength of ordinary people, and the conflict embodies the clash between power fueled by wealth and power fueled by necessity and love. The emotional core of this story, centered on the billionaire CEO and the single dad, is what truly gives it depth beyond the surface challenge. At first glance, it looks like a story about money, a test of skill, and perhaps even a battle of intellect. But what makes it meaningful is the emotional current underneath, the human motivations and vulnerabilities that drive each character. On one side we have the single dad, whose every choice and action is tethered to his child's future, and on the other, the billionaire CEO, whose challenge might seem flippant but also reveals his own loneliness, his mistrust, and his unspoken longing to witness something authentic in a world where most people bend to his wealth. Exploring these layers reveals why the story resonates on an emotional level, far beyond the literal contest. The single dad embodies the theme of sacrifice. Every day for him is already a negotiation between exhaustion and perseverance. He wakes up earlier than most, not because he desires to but because he must, balancing work with parenting, bills with school lunches, and his own needs with those of his child. His emotional foundation is love, but that love is tested constantly by practical burdens. When the billionaire CEO throws him the challenge, what might look to others like a simple game instantly transforms into something weighty for him. The promise of doubled pay isn't just about having more disposable income, it represents relief, breathing space, perhaps even the ability to say yes to his child's simple wishes that he has been forced to say no to. The challenge becomes infused with personal meaning, and that infuses his every effort with urgency and intensity. In the dad's emotional journey, the theme of self-doubt looms large. Many single parents are haunted by feelings of inadequacy, wondering if they are truly giving enough, if their children suffer because of their limitations, if they themselves are strong enough to withstand the constant demands. When faced with a billionaire CEO, a figure who embodies ultimate success, those doubts intensify. Standing across from a man who could buy in a moment what he has struggled to earn over years, the dad might initially feel dwarfed. The CEO's challenge could even feel condescending, a spotlight cast on his supposed inferiority. But beneath the weight of intimidation lies resilience, the quiet steel forged by years of survival. Emotionally, this sets up the arc of the father moving from doubt to determination, from questioning his worth to proving it in front of the very person who thought him unworthy. For the billionaire, the emotional layer is more subtle but equally important. On the outside, he wears the armor of arrogance, the sharpness of one used to giving orders and having people scramble to fulfill them. His offer of doubled pay seems like an act of power, a way to demonstrate that money controls the terms of human effort. Yet embedded in that act is a quiet confession of his own disillusionment. Billionaires often live in bubbles where honesty is scarce, where people flatter and perform rather than show real grit or authenticity. By issuing a challenge, especially one involving translation, a task that requires patience, skill, and deep understanding, he is, in a way, searching for something real, something beyond the artificial responses he gets daily. His emotional core is loneliness disguised as dominance, a longing to find someone who cannot be bought entirely by wealth but who can rise because of something more profound inside. The emotional interplay between these two characters is what makes the story compelling. The father enters the challenge driven by love for his child. Every line he translates, every decision he makes during the test, is infused with the image of his child's face, the thought of dinners together, school trips he could finally afford, or the quiet joy of not having to say, "We can't afford it." His motivation is raw and pure. In contrast, the CEO is motivated by curiosity, perhaps even boredom. But as he watches the father, as he sees the weight of real stakes reflected in the man's posture and eyes, something stirs in him. He is reminded of the hunger he once had when he was starting out, before success numbed him. The emotional connection begins to form not through words but through the contrast of their experiences, the CEO seeing in the dad what he has lost, the dad seeing in the CEO the embodiment of what he hopes to someday reach. There is also the emotional undercurrent of pride. For the single dad, pride is not about arrogance but about reclaiming dignity. Being a single parent often involves facing judgment, stereotypes, and assumptions that one is somehow incomplete or less capable. By accepting the challenge, he asserts his value not just as an employee but as a human being who refuses to be underestimated. The CEO, in contrast, experiences pride differently. His pride is rooted in his empire, his achievements, and the control he exerts over others. Yet, as the story progresses, the father's pride, a quieter, humbler kind, begins to resonate, showing the CEO that there is a form of strength not tied to wealth but to perseverance and love. This interplay of different forms of pride creates a rich emotional contrast. The story also carries the emotional thread of fear. The father fears failure, not only for himself but for what it would mean to his child. If he fails, it reinforces the cruel voice in his head that whispers he isn't good enough, that he cannot break free from the grind. The CEO, meanwhile, has a different fear, fear of being impressed, fear of vulnerability. If the father succeeds, it shakes his worldview, suggesting that his wealth does not make him superior in every way. It threatens to reveal that true value exists beyond money, something the CEO may not be ready to confront. This shared but opposing fear intensifies the drama, because both characters risk something deeply personal in the outcome. The emotional core extends into the symbolic nature of translation itself. Translation is not just about words, it is about understanding cultures, emotions, and meanings that lie beneath the surface. For the father, this mirrors his role as a parent, translating the harsh world into lessons his child can digest, translating scarcity into resilience, translating struggle into hope. For the CEO, translation symbolizes a barrier he cannot easily cross. He can purchase translations, hire experts, but he cannot buy the lived experience that teaches one to truly understand and interpret meaning. The father's ability to translate thus becomes a metaphor for his emotional intelligence, for his ability to navigate life with compassion and grit, something the CEO, for all his money, may lack. Another crucial element is the emotional weight of legacy. The father is fighting not for himself but for his child's tomorrow. Every ounce of effort he puts into the challenge is rooted in a vision of the future, better schools, safer neighborhoods, opportunities that were once out of reach. This legacy-driven motivation adds an intensity that no paycheck alone could produce. The CEO, too, is haunted by legacy, though in a different way. His empire, his reputation, his brand, these are the things he worries about leaving behind. Yet when he sees the father working for something as simple and profound as his child's smile, he is confronted with a different, more human vision of legacy. This emotional juxtaposition forces him to reflect on what truly matters. The interaction also triggers empathy, which is a pivotal emotional element. At first, the CEO may see the dad as just another employee, someone beneath him. But as the father struggles, persists, and refuses to give up, empathy begins to erode the CEO's detachment. He sees not just a worker but a man carrying the weight of fatherhood, and in that recognition, he feels something stir that he hasn't felt in years. The father, meanwhile, begins to sense the loneliness hidden in the CEO's challenge, the hollowness behind his wealth. Through this mutual, silent recognition, the story builds an emotional bridge between two vastly different lives. The emotional heartbeat of the story is, ultimately, love. Love is what drives the father to rise to the challenge despite fear and exhaustion. Love is what transforms translation from a task into a battle cry. Love is what compels him to believe that, against all odds, he can succeed. For the CEO, witnessing this love becomes both unsettling and inspiring. In his world, loyalty is often purchased, and affection is conditional. To see someone act out of pure love for a child is a reminder of a kind of wealth he cannot measure in numbers. It is this recognition that provides the emotional climax of the story, the moment when the conflict transcends money and skill and becomes about what it means to live, to sacrifice, and to love in a way that reshapes lives.